Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are standing at the foot of history. We're craning our necks to look up at the things human beings have built to try and, touch the sky.
It's a huge topic.
It really is. And usually when we talk about the wonders of the world, it feels like we're just flipping through a glossy travel brochure.
Or, checking off a bucket list.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's all about where to take the perfect selfie. But looking at the stack of research we have today, monuments of ambition, monuments of meaning, and the architecture of aspiration, that whole narrative just feels incredibly shallow.
It does. It's so often reduced to a checklist.
Yeah.
Been there, done that, got the magnet.
Right.
But if you actually strip away all the, the tourism board marketing, a wonder isn't just a pretty backdrop. It's something much deeper.
Exactly. And that's the central premise we really need to start with. A wonder of the world isn't just a tourist trap. It is a mirror.
A mirror. I like that.
Yeah, these structures are basically psychological projections of the civilizations that built them. They reflect our ego, our absolute terror of death.
And our desperate struggle against time itself.
That's a beautiful, if slightly ominous way to put it.
Well, it's accurate, isn't it? It's about the clash between power and entropy. We build these things to say, I was here, and the universe spends the next 1,000 years trying to erase that statement.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really unpack why we do it. Why do humans bankrupt entire empires just to stack stones on top of each other?
And how has the definition of a wonder shifted? I mean, from an ancient Greek travel guide to
a modern internet popularity contest. And ultimately, what do these massive piles of rock actually say about who we are as a species?
It's a massive topic. And I think what's so fascinating is that while the technology changes, we go from limestone to steel to maybe, digital code.
Your drive remains the same.
Exactly the same. We are trying to anchor ourselves in a world that is constantly, flowing away from us.
Okay, so let's unpack this. To understand where we are now, we have to go back to the very beginning, the origin story.
Right.
Because I think most people, and I'll include myself in this until I read these sources, assume the Seven Wonders was this official global ranking system.
Like the Oscars of the ancient world.
Yes. Or like an international committee sat down in Geneva and, voted on the top seven.
It's little placards for each country.
But the sources, especially the historical analysis in Monuments of Ambition, they make it so clear that it was actually something much more casual.
It wasn't a Hall of Fame.
Not at all. It started as themata.
Yes, themata.
Yeah.
In ancient Greek, it essentially just translates to sights.
Things to be seen.
Exactly. Or sometimes they use the word techni, which means works of craft. It wasn't a definitive list of the best things. It was more of a recommendation list.
A sightseeing checklist for a very, very specific demographic.
Precisely. It was a travel guide. But we have to remember, who was writing the guide, right? This wasn't a global survey.
Yeah.
This was a Hellenistic, Mediterranean-centric map. It was a Greek traveler's itinerary. If you were a wealthy Greek in the 2nd century BCE, this was your Lonely Planet guide.
So it's inherently biased from the start. It's basically a map of Alexander the Great's conquests and the immediate neighborhood.
That's a really fair assessment. I mean, you have figures like Herodotus, way back in the 5th century BCE. He's traveling through the Persian Empire, which was just massive, and he sees these barbarian cultures.
And when you say barbarian, you mean in the Greek sense of just non-Greek.
Exactly, just anyone who didn't speak Greek. And he's marveling at what they built. But the list we know, the canon, that really solidifies much later, around the 2nd century BCE.
And that's where I get guys like Philon of Byzantium and Antipater of Sidon.
Right. Antipater is a poet. He's not an engineer or historian. He's a poet writing verses about these places.
So it's more about the romance of it all.
It is. He's essentially curating a list of look what humans can do. But it's very much a look what we and our neighbors can do. It completely ignores China. It ignores the Americas, sub-Saharan Africa.
Because they just didn't know those places existed, or at least they didn't have easy access. I mean, the Great Wall of China was being built around the same time some of these lists were circulating.
But Antipater had no clue. It's a snapshot of a specific worldview. It represents the boundaries of the known world for a Hellenistic scholar at that moment in time.
Okay, so let's run through the original seven, the heavy hitters, because the fate of these structures is, well, it's kind of tragic when you look at the list as a whole.
It really is.
It really hammers home that point you made earlier about entropy.
It's a lesson in impermanence for sure.
So number one, the big one, the Great Pyramid of Giza. Built around, what, 2500 or 2600 BCE.
And here is the incredible fact, the one thing you have to remember. It is the only original wonder still standing.
That blows my mind every single time I think about it. The oldest one on the list is the only survivor.
It just speaks to the sheer mass and the engineering stability of the pyramid shape.
Yeah.
It's the most stable geometric form there is.
Right.
You just pile enough stone with a wide base, and it is not going anywhere. It has weathered political collapse, erosion, looting, and it's still there.
Okay, but moving down the list, things get a lot more shaky. You have the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, supposedly built around 600 BCE.
And the sources say the existence of this one is, well, it's debated, right?
Oh, heavily debated. We'll get into the specific mystery of the gardens in a bit, but there's a really strong chance they weren't even in Babylon.
It's the only wonder on the list where archaeologists are kind of like, did this actually exist, or was it just a poetic invention?
Which is fascinating. Okay, then you have the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus.
Ah, this one was less about height and more about just sheer surface area and beauty, the scale of it.
A truly massive temple, but it had a rough run, destroyed by arson.
By a guy who just wanted to be famous, which is a whole other psychological deep dive in itself.
Seriously. Then it was rebuilt and then destroyed again by the Goths.
It was described as a marble forest. The descriptions we have say it was just overwhelming, but now it's a single column in a swamp. That's it.
Wow. Then we have the statue of Zeus at Olympia.
This was inside a temple, a giant gold and ivory statue. Phidias, the famous sculptor, made it.
And the descriptions are just unbelievable. It was so big that if Zeus had stood up, he would have unroofed the temple.
Can you imagine seeing that? But it was, made of wood and ivory and gold, so it was vulnerable. Destroyed by fire in the 5th century CE.
Then the mausoleum at Halicarnassus. This is where we get the word mausoleum, right?
Correct. It was the tomb of Mausolus, a satrap in the Persian Empire. It actually stood for a long time. It was quite durable.
But not forever.
Not forever. It was eventually destroyed by a series of earthquakes. And then, and this is the common fate for so many of these, it was dismantled for building material.
The Knights of St. John used the stones to build their castle at Bodrum.
That's the ultimate insult, isn't it? Nice tomb you have there. I'm going to use it to build a fort.
It's recycling, I guess.
Recycling at its finest, or worst, depending on how you view heritage.
Then the Colossus of Rhodes, the giant bronze statue of Helios.
This one is fascinating because its lifespan was so short. It stood for the shortest amount of time of any of them.
How long?
Only about 54 years. An earthquake toppled it around 226 BCE.
And the interesting thing the text mentions is that even after it fell, people still came to see it. It was still a tourist attraction.
They did. Pliny the Elder wrote about it. He said that even lying on the ground, it was a wonder. He said few men could even clasp their arms around its thumb.
That's incredible, but eventually...
Eventually, it was sold for scrap, melted down.
Sold for scrap. That is just such a sad ending for a wonder of the world. And finally, the Lighthouse of Alexandria.
A true wonder of science and engineering. This one wasn't religious, it was functional.
Right. It guided ships into the harbor of Alexandria, one of the busiest ports in the ancient world.
For centuries. But again, earthquakes. They are the great enemy of tall structures. It was damaged, abandoned, and eventually the stones were repurposed into the citadel of Cape Bay.
So when we look at this whole list, what just jumps out at me is this survival paradox, as the sources call it.
Yes.
The fame of these things is immortal. I mean, we are still talking about the Colossus of Rhodes more than 2,000 years later. But the structures themselves, they were incredibly fragile.
That's the core irony, isn't it? The physical objects surrendered to entropy almost immediately in the grand scheme of things.
Except for Giza.
Except for Giza. But the idea of the wonder, the narrative that has outlasted the stone and the bronze, we are keeping them alive by talking about them right now.
Which brings us to the why. I mean, why build them in the first place? If they're just going to fall down or be sold for scrap or turned into forts, why do we bankrupt our nations to build them?
This is where we have to shift from history to psychology. And the sources point to a really powerful concept called terror management theory, or TMT.
TMT. It sounds like a corporate strategy, but it's actually about existential dread.
It is. The basic idea, which was developed by social psychologists, is that human beings are unique because we are painfully aware of our own mortality.
We know we're going to die.
We know we are going to die. And that creates this profound existential terror that just sort of hums in the background of everything we do.
It's the engine of anxiety.
Exactly. So how do we cope? How do we manage that terror? We create culture. We create things that we believe will outlast us. Monumental architecture is a direct response to that terror.
It's a quest for symbolic immortality.
Symbolic immortality, that's the key phrase.
So a leader like Khufu or Shah Jahan building the Taj Mahal.
Right, they know their biology is going to fail, the body rots, no amount of medicine in the ancient world could stop that. But if you build a mountain of stone or a tomb so beautiful it makes people weep for centuries,
the legacy remains.
Your legacy remains. If the body rots, the stone remains. You are projecting yourself into a future you will never see. You're saying, I matter. I was here. And you will remember me.
It's an act of defiance.
That's a profound act of defiance against the silence of the universe.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's deeply human. But it's not just about the leader, is it? It's not just one guy with a massive ego saying, look at me. The sources talk about the effect these buildings have on the people looking at them, the subjects.
Yes, absolutely. This is where we get into the science of awe.
Oh.
The ancient historian Diodorus Siculus called it ekplexis.
Ekplexis.
It translates to awestruck astonishment. But it's not just wow. It implies a kind of shock, a paralysis. It's that feeling when your jaw drops and you just freeze because your brain can't compute the scale of what you're seeing.
I've felt that, standing in front of a massive cathedral or, looking at the Grand Canyon. You feel tiny.
And that tiny feeling is crucial. Modern research, including work by Dr. Dieter Keltner, who's mentioned in Monuments of Meaning, shows that awe serves a specific evolutionary function.
How so?
It diminishes the self. It shrinks the ego. And when your personal ego shrinks, you feel more connected to the collective, to the group.
So these monuments were basically giant social glue dispensers.
In a way, yes. They were designed to bind people to the collective. If you are standing in front of the Great Pyramid in 2500 BCE, you aren't thinking about your petty squabble with your neighbor over a gut.
No, you're thinking about the power of the pharaoh.
The power of the pharaoh, the power of the gods, and your place in that massive, overwhelming
It
system.
makes you feel part of something larger than yourself.
Exactly. And that feeling enables collaborative action. Awe makes us better followers and better cooperators. It was essential for the state to function.
Wow, that makes so much sense. It's political stability through masonry.
And through meaning. We can't forget meaning. Joseph Campbell, the great mythologist, he viewed wonders as the externalization of mythic consciousness.
Right.
And Yuval Noah Harari, who is also cited here, talks about them as narrative anchors. They anchor our collective belief systems in physical reality.
It's one thing to say the gods are powerful.
Right.
It's a whole other thing to point to a 40-foot statue of Zeus made of gold and ivory and say, look, there he is.
Exactly. It makes the myth tangible. It proves the narrative is real.
Okay, speaking of myths, let's get into some of the aha moments from the research, because history, as we know, is often a game of telephone. And some of the things we think we know about these wonders are just dead wrong.
There are some major misconceptions that have persisted for centuries.
Let's start with the big one, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. I always picture this, this lush, terraced paradise in the middle of Babylon. I think we all have that image from children's books.
We do, but the sources say maybe not.
The sources suggest they might not have been in Babylon at all.
Which is wild, considering Babylon is right there in the name.
I know. This is a fascinating piece of historical detective work. Dr. Stephanie Dalley, who is a prominent historian from Oxford, she argues that the Greeks got mixed up.
How so?
Well, if you look at the contemporary Babylonian texts, the records written at the time of Nebuchadnezzar, they don't mention the gardens. Not a single word.
And you'd think they would. It would be a major achievement to brag about.
You would think. Plus, Babylon is flat, right? It's in the floodplains of Mesopotamia.
Extremely flat. It's not an easy place to irrigate a massive terraced garden that requires water to be lifted hundreds of feet into the air.
You'd need incredible machinery or water pressure.
Exactly. So where were they?
The evidence points about 300 miles north to Nineveh.
Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire. A different empire entirely.
Right. King Sennacherib. He left these incredibly detailed inscriptions about his palace without a rival. And in those inscriptions, he describes massive gardens. He describes the specific trees. He describes the irrigation system.
And this is the key part.
This is the key. He describes a screw-like mechanism to raise water.
Like an Archimedes screw, but centuries before Archimedes was even born.
Exactly. A cast bronze screw to lift water from the aqueducts up to the terraces. And the topography of Nineveh is hilly. It makes sense there. The engineering fits the location.
So how did the Greeks get it so wrong?
Well, after the Assyrian Empire fell, Babylon became the dominant power in the region. For a Greek traveler coming centuries later, the distinction between Assyrian and Babylonian might have been a bit blurry.
Right, they were both just Mesopotamian powers from a long time ago.
It's like confusing, I don't know, New York and Boston 2,000 years from now. You might just say the Great Statue of Liberty of Boston.
Right. If the records are lost and you're just going off oral tradition and travel stories, the location drifts.
That is just a huge historical mix-up. Okay, here's another one that drives me crazy because I hear it all the time. The Great Wall of China, visible from the moon.
No, absolutely not. Categorically no.
Thank you. I feel like this needs to be a public service announcement.
It is such a stubborn myth. It actually started in the early 20th century, before we even had space travel, as a way to describe the vastness of the wall.
But just think about the physics of it. The Great Wall is massive in length, thousands of miles. But how wide is it?
Maybe 20, 30 feet at the widest points.
Exactly. And what color is it?
It's made of stone and earth, so it's brown and gray.
Which is exactly the color of the terrain all around it. So, from space, you are trying to see a brown line on a brown background that is narrower than a highway.
So from the moon, with the naked eye, impossible.
It would be like trying to see a single human hair from 2 miles away.
That's a great comparison. Even from low Earth orbit, which is much closer, astronauts have said it's incredibly difficult to spot unless you know exactly where to look and the lighting is perfect.
I love that. It's long, but it's thin.
Exactly.
Okay, let's tackle a heavier one. The pyramids and slave labor. Hollywood, loves to show us slaves being whipped to drag stones across the desert.
The classic Cecil B. DeMille image.
It is. It's very dramatic, and it fits a certain narrative about tyranny, but archaeologically, it's incorrect.
It's just not what the evidence shows.
So who built them?
A highly organized, paid workforce. And they were mostly farmers.
Farmers, not slaves?
Farmers. Think about the Nile. It floods every single year. The inundation. For months, the fields are completely underwater.
So you have a massive population with nothing to do. They can't farm.
So the state essentially employed them in a massive public works project.
Yeah.
We found the workers' villages at Giza. We've analyzed the skeletons.
And what do they tell us?
They were eating prime beef, lamb, fish. They had medical care. We see healed fractures that were clearly set by doctors. You don't feed slaves prime beef and set their broken bones.
Wow, so it was a way to keep the economy moving and the people busy during the off-season.
It was a national project.
Yeah.
It redistributed wealth from the state granaries to the people. It unified the country. It was almost like a WPA project in the 1930s, but on a spiritual, monumental scale.
That completely changes the vibe of the monument for me. It's less a symbol of oppression and more a symbol of national unity.
Or at least highly effective state bureaucracy. Yeah. It shows that the Egyptian state was incredibly sophisticated at logistics and project management.
True. Now, speaking of how they were built, we have to address the ancient aliens crowd. Yeah. The theories about lost technology.
Ah, yes. The idea that our ancestors must have had lasers.
You see the precision of the stones at Giza or places like Pumapunku in Bolivia, and people go, humans couldn't do this with copper chisels, it must be lasers or aliens.
And it's a tempting narrative because the precision is truly mind-boggling. I mean, the Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 3/60ths of a degree.
Which is better than the Greenwich Observatory in London.
It's insane. But mainstream experts like Dr. Zahi Hawass, who's mentioned in the text, they push back hard on the alien theory.
Yeah.
And their argument is that we vastly, vastly underestimate ancient ingenuity.
And we underestimate what you can do with unlimited manpower, unlimited time, and extreme motivation.
Exactly. And simple tools used very, very cleverly.
Right.
The Great Pyramid was built without iron tools. They used copper, they used stone pounders, they used sand as an abrasive, and water as a lubricant.
Yeah.
But they also had a profound understanding of physics and geometry. Attributing it to aliens is actually a bit of a disservice to our ancestors.
It's kind of saying, you guys weren't smart enough to do this on your own.
Exactly. It's a form of what some call chronological snobbery. We assume because they didn't have iPhones, they were stupid.
Right.
In reality, they were just as smart as we are. They just apply their intelligence to moving stone instead of coding apps.
That's a great way to put it. We haven't gotten smarter. We've just changed our tools.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've covered the ancient past. Let's jump to the 21st century, because the Seven Wonders list got a major reboot recently. And this reboot tells us a lot about how the world has changed.
It really does. The new Seven Wonders campaign in the early 2000s.
This was huge. I remember this. It was absolutely everywhere.
A massive global campaign. But the methodology was completely different. It wasn't one guy writing a poem. It was an internet vote.
The first time in history that a wonder was decided by a popularity contest.
Over 100 million votes were cast via the internet and SMS text messages. And that just shifts the whole paradigm. We went from scholarly observation,
some Greek intellectual deciding what matters,
to democratic selection. The whole world got a weigh in.
And just think about the result. The new list includes the Great Wall, Petra in Jordan, Christ the Redeemer in Brazil, Machu Picchu in Peru, Chichen Itza in Mexico, the Colosseum in Rome, and the Taj Mahal in India.
It's a much more diverse list.
Oh, significantly.
It effectively decolonized the concept of wonder. We finally broke out of the Mediterranean basin. We acknowledged that great civilizations existed in the Americas and Asia. The original list was Eurocentric. This list is global.
But there's always a but. The sources point out that this wasn't just a pure celebration of culture. It was also a massive marketing campaign.
And this brings us to the concept of soft power.
Right, because getting on this list isn't just about bragging rights. It's about money.
Massive amounts of money. These wonders are now global brands. For a country like Jordan, Petra is a huge percentage of their tourism economy. When Petra was named a new wonder, tourism just spiked.
And for Peru, Machu Picchu is the economic engine of the Sacred Valley.
Absolutely. So governments started campaigning for this. It was like hosting the Olympics.
You had governments launching Vote For Us campaigns, texting drives. It became political.
It did. Because having a UNESCO heritage site or being on a wonders list is a geopolitical validator. It says, we are a serious nation with a serious history. It attracts investment, it attracts diplomacy.
But then we hit the dark side of that popularity.
The Instagrammability crisis.
Over-tourism. The text describes it so perfectly. The wonder is now experienced through a 6-inch screen.
I've seen this with my own eyes. You go to these incredible places, and people aren't looking at the monument. They're looking at themselves in their phone's camera, with the monument in the background.
It's the Disneyfication of heritage.
It is. The aesthetic value, how good it looks on TikTok, often trumps the historical sanctity of the place. And worse, it leads to displacement.
Local communities getting pushed out.
Yes. The tourist gaze demands luxury hotels and souvenir shops. It demands a sanitized, easy experience. And often, the people who actually live there, whose ancestors might have built these places, are pushed to the margins to make way for the tour buses.
The place becomes a theme park of itself.
Correct. And we risk loving these places to death. I mean, the vibration from thousands of tour buses, the humidity from millions of breathing tourists, it actually damages the structures.
So we are back to entropy. We are literally accelerating the destruction of these places by trying to appreciate them.
That is the great paradox of modern tourism.
Let's zoom in on a few of these case studies, because the engineering details are just too cool to skip over. They really highlight the intelligence we were talking about earlier. I want to talk about Chichen Itza.
The Maya. They were absolute masters of physics and astronomy.
The acoustic engineering here is just wild. The source mentions the Pyramid of Kukulkan.
Yes, also known as El Castillo.
So if you stand at the base of the main staircase and you clap your hands, the echo that bounces back doesn't sound like a clap. It sounds exactly like the chirp of the Quetzal bird.
A Quetzal bird?
Yeah.
Which was sacred to them. It was the bird of the heavens, a messenger of the gods.
And the sources emphasize, this is not an accident. You don't accidentally build a stone pyramid that chirps like a holy bird.
No, the geometry of the steps acts as a kind of sound filter. It stretches the sound wave of the clap into a chirp. It requires incredibly precise calculation of the step height and depth. It's acoustic engineering.
That is just mind-blowing. It proves that these wonders were multi-sensory experiences. We see them as silent ruins today, you know? But back then, they were manipulating sound. They were manipulating light.
Like the shadow serpent.
Exactly. During the spring and autumn equinox, the shadow of the pyramid terraces falls on the balustrade in such a way that it looks like a giant serpent is slithering down the stairs to join the stone serpent head at the bottom.
Think about the theatricality of that, the sheer power of that moment.
Imagine you're a regular Maya citizen. You're standing there in the plaza, the high priest claps, the pyramid chirps, the snake god descends from the heavens. You're going to believe whatever that guy tells you.
That is the power of the wonder. It proves the divine connection of the ruling class. It's theater on a monumental scale. It legitimized the entire social order.
Incredible. Now let's talk about one that was left off the original list. Angkor Wat.
The largest religious monument on Earth in Cambodia.
And the ancient Greeks had no clue it existed.
None whatsoever. It was built in the 12th century, so much later than the ancient wonders. But even when Europeans started exploring that part of the world, it took a long time for it to register in the Western consciousness.
And the story of Angkor Wat is so interesting because it shows how the definition of a wonder changes with politics.
Yes. For centuries, it was a wonder to the Khmer people. It was the heart of their empire. It didn't need a list. But then the French arrive in the 19th century, they discover it, and we should put discover in heavy air quotes.
Right. Look what we found that you've been living in and worshiping at for 500 years.
Exactly. The French naturalist Henri Mahal popularized it in the West. He described it as a rival to Solomon's temple. But the French used it to justify their colonial presence.
How did they do that?
They argued, look, this great civilization fell into ruin. You need us, the French, to protect it and restore it.
So the wonder becomes a tool of colonialism.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But then, fast forward, Cambodia reclaims it. It becomes the symbol on their national flag. It's the only building to appear on a national flag. It illustrates that a wonder's identity isn't static. It evolves as the culture around it evolves.
And then there's the Colosseum. A wonder of engineering, for sure, but also a horror show.
This is the complexity of these places. We look at the arches, the concrete, the retractable roof, which it had, by the way.
Wait, a retractable roof in ancient Rome?
The velarium, a massive canvas awning that was worked by sailors from the Roman Navy. They could extend it to shade the crowd from the sun.
That's amazing. It's basically a modern stadium.
It is. The crowd control, the vomitoria, which were the exits, the ticketing system. It was a masterpiece of logistics. But the purpose of the building was spectacular violence.
Death as entertainment.
It was a symbol of Roman civic unity, but that unity was built on the blood of gladiators and animals and condemned prisoners. It reminds us that wonders are often morally ambiguous.
Right.
They're beautiful, but they're often built on suffering. We can't just marvel at the stone, we have to ask what happened on the stone.
Which leads us nicely into the critical analysis. How we view these things depends heavily on who we are. The sources draw a really sharp distinction between Western and indigenous views of what makes something a wonder.
This is a crucial distinction. The Western view, generally speaking, and this goes all the way back to the Greeks, focuses on the object.
The thing itself.
The height, the weight, the engineering feat. It's
Yeah.
about man conquers nature. It's about dominance. Look how big this rock is that I moved.
Right. It's a very masculine, very ego-driven view.
Exactly. But the indigenous, or say an Eastern view, often focuses on the connection. How does the structure sit in harmony with the landscape?
The example of Machu Picchu comes to mind immediately.
Perfectly. Machu Picchu is an incredible feat of engineering, but it wasn't designed to dominate the mountain. It was designed to integrate with it.
In what way?
The stones of the buildings mimic the shape of the peaks behind them. The agricultural terraces stabilize the mountain against erosion. It's a conversation with nature, not a command over it.
And the Japanese view mentioned in the text.
The three views of Japan. This is a list of wonders, but they're not buildings, they're landscapes.
What are they?
A pine-clad sandbar at Amenohashi Gate. A famous torii gate that seems to float in the water at Miyajima. It's about moments of natural beauty.
That's a very different kind of wonder. It's so much quieter.
It prizes harmonious beauty over sheer scale. It suggests that a wonder is about a moment of aesthetic perfection, not just about how many tons of rock you can stack.
That's not about, look what I built. It's about, look how beautiful this world is.
Exactly, and this clash of views leads directly to the restoration dilemma.
The ship of Theseus debate.
Right. If you take a ruin like the Parthenon and you rebuild it with new marble to make it look perfect and whole again, is it still the Parthenon? Or is it a replica?
This is known as anastylosis.
Anastylosis. It's the archaeological term for reconstruction using original materials. But how much new material can you add before it becomes, fake?
Archaeologists fight about this constantly.
They do. Do we leave it as a ruin to respect the passage of time, to show the scars of history, the fires, the earthquakes? Or do we rebuild it to show its original glory?
And for some indigenous cultures, this isn't just an academic debate. It's much deeper.
No. For some, restoring a site for tourists is an act of desecration. If a site is sacred, Maybe it's supposed to return to the Earth. Everything have a life cycle. Maybe turning it into a polished attraction for ticket holders is an insult to the ancestors.
It's the difference between a living site and a museum exhibit.
Exactly. And Dr. Deborah Silverman, a post-colonial scholar, argues that the whole concept of wonders is in itself an imperial gaze. It's about categorizing, claiming, and commodifying the works of others.
Like saying, I'm going to put your sacred temple on my list and rate it out of 10.
And in doing so, I define its value. I control the narrative. If I say it's a wonder, it's valuable. If I don't, it's just a pile of rocks. That is an act of power.
That is a powerful critique. It really makes you rethink the whole bucket list mentality. It makes you realize that even the act of looking at a monument is a political act.
You should, definitely.
So if we look forward, what is the future of wonder? Where do we go from here?
That is the big question, isn't it? We are moving from a species of builders, of stone stackers, to a digital civilization.
We aren't stacking stones anymore, at least not in the same way. We build skyscrapers, but they're mostly commercial. They're about finance.
No. The Burj Khalifa is incredibly tall, but is it a wonder in the same spiritual sense as the pyramids? I'm not so sure. It's a marvel of capitalism and engineering, but does it address the terror of death?
I don't think so. So what are the future candidates? What does the research speculate?
Well, the sources play with this a lot. Will future wonders be biological? Or will they be digital?
Like what? What's an example?
Maybe the first self-sustaining city on Mars. That would certainly trigger a plexus. If we see a dome on the red planet, that awestruck astonishment would be back in full force.
Absolutely. That would be the ultimate man conquers nature moment.
Or maybe something grander but less visible. A global project to heal the atmosphere, rewilding an entire continent.
That's a cool idea. The wonder isn't a building, it's a healed ecosystem, a functioning planet.
Imagine if we restored the Amazon rainforest to its full pre-industrial extent. That would be a monument to human will and cooperation, but it would be living.
Or even the icy geysers of Enceladus, one of Saturn's moons. If we actually managed to send a probe through them to search for life, that is a wonder of exploration.
The text mentions invisible wonders, too.
Yes, like oral traditions, the stories and mythologies that have survived for thousands of years without a single stone being laid.
Or digital systems. The internet itself could be considered a wonder of complexity. It connects us all, just like the social glue of the pyramids. In theory, it is the repository of all human knowledge.
But the ultimate shift here seems to be in the purpose of the wonder.
Right. Our ancestors built to defy death. They built tombs. They built temples to ensure a good afterlife.
I'm afraid to die, so I will build this.
But perhaps, the sources suggest, we will build to preserve life.
That's a profound shift in thinking.
Instead of a monument to a dead king, a monument to the living biosphere, the architecture of ambition becomes the architecture of survival. We might build massive seawalls to save our cities, or global seed banks to save our crops from extinction.
I love that. It's a hopeful thought. We stop building for our own individual ego, and we start building for our grandchildren.
Exactly.
So let's bring this all home. We've gone from Greek travel guides to the pyramids, to the Instagram crisis, to the ethics of rebuilding these things.
It's been quite a journey.
What's the so what here? At the end of the day, why should you, the listener, care about these old piles of rocks?
Because they aren't just stone, they are monuments of meaning. They reflect what we value, they reflect what we fear, and they reflect what we hope will survive us.
They are us, writ large.
We are the physical manifestation of the human scream against silence. We shout into the void, "We were here!"
And sometimes the void shouts back with an earthquake, but we keep building.
We keep building. Because to stop building is to accept that we are temporary, and we just can't bring ourselves to do that.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought, something to chew on. We've talked about how the pyramids and the Great Wall define the civilizations that built them. When you look back at them, we know who those people were. We have a sense of what they valued.
Right.
So here's the question. As we look to the stars and into the digital realm, what kind of wonders will future generations inherit from us? And maybe more importantly, what will those wonders say about who we were?
That is the ultimate question.
Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.
Keep wondering.